96% of entrepreneurs never get to 7 figures. The 4% that get there do things a little bit different. This video is about the specific protocol that I've shared with more than 300 entrepreneurs that have helped them build 6 and 7 figure business at record speed. The other day, I was talking with one of our most recent case studies, and he told me exactly the specific steps that he had gone through in order to reach 7 figures in less than 15 months. If you are currently hustling, working hard, overwhelmed, on the verge of burnout, trying to scale your business, but nothing is quite working, let me tell you, this will help you solve the problem. Because the solution to the scale you want in your business is not working harder. It's becoming the right kind of entrepreneur that can make the necessary choices to make sure 7 figures is the natural consequence of all of that hustle. And as you learn, it's never about how much you hustle, but how well you can prioritize and adapt your mindset to the road ahead. Welcome back. I'm Castillo, founder of Selfmastered Performance Institute for Founders. We help them scale fast without any procrastination, overwhelm, and burnout. And I was having this conversation the other day with one of our clients who had built a small fortune in about 15 months. And we were going through every single step that he had been following within the program in order to get there. And eventually, the conversation went into mindset, the specific decisions that he had made in order to eventually scale to 7 figures. And this is the protocol that allow him to achieve just that. First, you need to understand what that mindset actually means, right? Because mindset is this loaded word that means different things for different people. But I want you to understand mindset as a lens, right? Understand that everything that happens to you is filtered through your own mindset, through your own lens. You are calling the shots of the meaning that you assign to the things that happen to you, right? Something is good or bad depending on whether you choose to look at it from the right or the wrong perspective. You have the choice to interpret anything under a positive or a negative light. This is the skill of cognitive reframing. So when we are building a 1 million mindset, a 7-figure mindset, we need to understand that this is a lens. And we are going to be filtering every single thing that happens to us through that lens that we decide to take on. Anyone can do this. You can right now decide to build a 7-figure lens, a 7-figure mindset, and start filtering your reality through that mindset. And that is the first step, right? So the first step is understanding that you have a choice in how you build your mindset. And it all starts really by understanding what is the vision. And this is very important, vision or the goal. Having a vision or having a goal, in this case, is having a 1 million business, is the entry point for peak performance. And this has been known since the ancient Greeks. Aristotle, who used to be the mentor of Alexander the Great, already said that men are teleological beings, telos meaning goal, logos meaning reason. We need goals in order to reason. We need goals in order to function as human beings. And that is 2,000 years old. So the first thing we have to be clear about is what is the vision. This client of mine was absolutely fundamentally convinced that he wanted to build a 7-figure business from scratch as fast as humanly possible. And he wholeheartedly committed to that vision, to that one thing. And he was very clear on what type of business he was building. In this case, it was an agency, marketing agency, organic marketing agency. He understood what was the time frame, right? So he originally wanted to do it in 12 months. He did it in 15. And what was the necessary steps, the path that he needed to follow in order to get there, right? So the first step is always having a vision, a very clear understanding of how to get what we want. The goal-setting theory by Locke, already in the 1990s, already proves that having hard-hitting goals that are very precise work best for performance. If we say, I want to shed 10 pounds, but we don't perfectly map out what is the time frame, we will not get there. If we say we just want to lose weight and we don't perfectly define how much weight we want to shed, we will not lose it. So the goal is to be very clear and precise with specifically what you want. That is step number one. Now, let me tell you something. At this point, there's this tendency of setting a smart goals, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound, which is the typical goal-setting methodology. Let me tell you, this does not work. Smart goals are dumb. And they're dumb because of a very specific reason. Because if something is realistic, if something is easy for us, we do not marshal the necessary resources to go after it because we don't feel motivated enough. If my client would have said, I want to build a six-figure mindset or business, he would not have achieved it because it wouldn't have been a good enough goal for him to go after it. It had to be something called a stretch goal, something that sits outside of the circle of competence. So assuming that this is what you're able to do, if you really want to become better, you shouldn't stay in your comfort zone. You should absolutely go outside of your comfort zone in order to push and capitalize on the new things that you learn and the new behavior adaptations that you create in order to get to this goal. This is a stretch goal, right? So the first step is having a vision that is interesting, that is that really lights you up, that is purposeful, that pushes you outside of your comfort zone. That is the first step towards performance. If you want to build a six-figure business and you have potential for an eight-figure business, let me tell you, you'll never build a six-figure business because you will not care enough, right? So the first thing is having the vision, understanding what is the mindset that we're creating, what is the goal that we're going after, and what is the lens that we're going to be using to filter every single opportunity. Which leads me to point number two. Once we understand what is the goal, what is exactly what we're fighting for, why do we do what we do, then comes step number two, which is elevating self-awareness and filtering. So this is very, 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 very important. So important that most people never do it, which is why most people never get the result they want. In essence, what I'm saying here is that once you know exactly what is the lens, what is the benchmark that you are setting for your life, the next step is to raise your standards. You have to raise the floor of what you accept as possible. That means that every single thought, every single emotion, every single behavior, every single piece of information that is not aligned with the 1 million mindset does not get filtered through. Every time you have negative thoughts, you do not pay attention to them. Every time you are in a gossip or a conversation or somewhere that does not reflect your absolute total willingness to build a 1 million mindset and therefore a 1 million business, you don't pay attention to that thing. The only thing that you let through is literally the pieces of information that are relevant to what you are building. And that's the only thing you care about. The goal here is to consistently help yourself build an even stronger lens, a better filtering system, so that over time you do not even perceive the things that take you away from the path. At some point, you're so good at filtering the good things and filtering out the bad things that the natural consequence is that you pay attention to everything that is aligned with the 1 million mindset and not pay attention to what is not aligned. In the case of my client, he stopped hanging out with people that did not have a seven-figure business. They had a lot of business associates and a lot of relationships in the market, of course, but he started mainly with people that had the type of business he wanted to have. Then he also started moving away of the project in his business that yielded less outcome, the things that took a lot of work but yielded very little money. And he started reprioritizing and filtering in the things that matter most and filtering out the things that didn't. And there's two very specific protocols that are very important for you here to understand in order to get very good at self-awareness. Because if you want to understand thoughts, emotions, and behaviors as something that is not you, in other words, if you want to be able to sit with a thought without believing that thought, in order to ask yourself whether you should or not pay attention to the thought, you must do two things. One is mindfulness or spending time in silence, however you want to call it. and the other one is meditation. I know that this might not seem like very high performance, but these truly are the two most important habits that you can have in order to train your self-awareness, which is the core power you have for your performance. The more time you spend in silence, the better you wake up to your automatic thinking patterns. Realize that you don't have a seven-figure business because you are automatically thinking thoughts that are not aligned with you having a seven-figure business or mindset. You cannot control your automatic thinking until you have raised your self-awareness. And your self-awareness can only be raised by spending time in silence and spending time in meditation. That is how you train your mind to sit with your thoughts and choose thoughts, emotions, and behavior that better align with the goal that you're pursuing in life. So these two protocols are very, very important to elevate your self-awareness and learn how to discriminate between good and bad emotions that eventually lead to good or bad behaviors. So that is step number 2. Now, step number 3 is doubling down on this. You start creating thoughts. This is the most interesting part. And when you start creating your new reality, this is very, very powerful because you first set the goal. You first understand where you're going. Then you build the lens and you start filtering in what is aligned and filtering out what is not aligned. But at some point, you will have the power to choose thoughts, emotions, and behavior that are better aligned with that mindset. So it's not only about filtering in the good thing, it's about filtering out the good thing too. And you do this through thoughts. You create new thoughts, you create new emotions, and you create new behaviors. And the best way to induce yourself to new thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that are not yet part of who you are, how can you set the wheel in motions, is typically through affirmations, through visualization, and this is doing new stuff that you wouldn't otherwise do. In the case of my client, I remember that we were spending a lot of time together like last year, and he was having all of these kind of pieces of paper in which he had handwritten every single part of the vision. He had handwritten every single day the business he had, how much money he was making, the specific habits he was going to deploy, the affirmations he believed in, the visualization. And every time we met, he would have a different little piece of paper. And he would even have a screenshot on his cell phone that he would look at every single day. He was reprogramming his mind in a very conscientious way. This worked like gunbuster because he was creating his new reality by choosing the thoughts, the emotions, and the behaviors he needed at that time. Once he had committed to the vision, once he was filtering out what didn't matter, and finally he had the ability to choose, it was just a matter of time that he would eventually get to the goal. That is a very exciting part of peak performance. And there's tons of research about how affirmation, visualization, and trying new behaviors help sediment new standards. The goal really is having new standards every single week, consistently becoming better until you get to 7 figures. And there's plenty of research. Michael Gervais, which is a fantastic performance psychologist, talks a lot about how affirmations and visualizations help precisely in creating these new adaptations in the brain. The more you do this, the faster you get to the mindset, the faster you become the person you decided on becoming. So this is step number 3, creating the new reality. And if you're already doing this, you're already so much ahead than anyone else. Because remember, most people believe that you get to 7 figures by working hard. It's never about hard work. It's always about conscientiously prioritizing and building the right mindset you need in order to make the decisions that will get you there. The more you work on your mindset, the faster it becomes. And this has been known since the dawn of time. Now, this is good enough. If you're already, have the vision, you're filtering out what doesn't matter, filtering what matters, and creating a new reality, you're already winning. But how can we speed up so much quickly? How can we move super fast? Well, there's a 4th step that I always recommend, and I tell every single one of my clients, and everyone that does it really skyrockets its growth, that is going to really help you win. And this is accelerate through feedback. What this means is having an end of day report that you send to yourself every single day. That simple feedback loop mechanism is huge for your growth. Because if you're doing new things and you're trying new stuff, you want to know if those things are working or not working, and how are they building you up into a seven-figure founder, into building a seven-figure business. But most people never really think about what happened during the day. Nobody looks at the replay. But Olympic athletes and really any elite performer in any discipline is consistently looking at feedback. In fact, the difference between looking at feedback or not looking at feedback is called deliberate practice. This is a specific term coined by Anders Ericsson, which is the leading scientist in peak performance. The difference is very simple. If you do something and do not reflect on that performance, you're wasting your time. But if you consistently look at feedback and improve every single day, you cannot help but win. Because you're not 10,000 hours away. You're 10,000 iterations away from your goal. The faster you iterate, the faster you learn, the better you will become. This is why volume does not negate luck. Informed volume, feedback loop-driven volume negates luck. You need to be learning. So what I told my friend and my client was, dude, just keep doing what I taught you, but send yourself end-of-day reports every single day. Tell yourself what went right, what went wrong, and how to improve tomorrow. And try to have everyone on your team do the same. And this is why I ask my team too. And this, over time, created a spiraling feedback loop so that he was becoming increasingly good over time. He was moving up the ladder at record speed. And this is how he built a 1.5 million fortune within 15 months. Not because he hustled hard, not because he tried harder than anyone else, not because he hired everybody. No, because he conscientiously designed his mind to make the right decisions to get where he needed to go, without the burnout, without the overwhelm, without working harder than the average person. This is the secret to building a seven-figure business. It's never about hard work. It's about performance skills. It's about not what you do, but how you do it, how much you do it, and why you do it. As I always say, you're only going to fall to the level of your performance. If your performance is elite, you get elite results. If your performance is basic, you get basic results, right? So as a recap, the first step, let's recap so you're very clear on how to win at this. The first step, and we've known this since Aristotle, is having a vision. A vision or goal, okay? In this case is building a seven-figure business. The second thing is to raise your standards. And you do this by raising self-awareness and therefore standards. Because if you do not know, if you're not aware of your standards, how do you intend to raise them? Then step number 3 is you create your reality. That means creating your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And finally, and this is the most important, I argue, is collect feedback. Daily feedback. Feedback that helps you become better. Feedback that makes you unstoppable. That is how you win. Not through hard work, not by doubling down on marketing, not by changing your tactic, not by installing a chatbot, not by, running more ads. No, it's by having very clear understanding of what drives success in business. And it's never about hard work. It's always about performance, right? So I hope this was useful. Understand that this works. This is how we teach our clients what a 300 point. I gave you the case study of one of my real clients. It worked for me. It worked with, hundreds of people before you. Apply it. Be very clear on the goal. Raise your standards, create your reality, and use feedback every single day. And I will guarantee that you will win. If you want to have like a full framework and blueprint for this, click on this video and you learn how much more there is to performance if you want to become a 7-figure entrepreneur. See you in the next video.